Hello, welcome to Forest Focus. Nottingham Forest and South American football feel pretty intertwined these days, be it transfers, potentially buying into clubs, or having a current Brazil international in our team. So it's great to welcome back a friend of the show to discuss all that and a little bit more today. Forest fan, Nathan Joyce of the Copa Club. How are you doing today, mate?
Yeah, I'm very good. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm not too bad. This is take two for people who obviously don't know that. We had a little technical fault, so I'm hoping our Wi-Fi holds up. You've been a busy man this week, though, with international football, no doubt, haven't you?
Yeah, international football rounding up the World Cup qualifiers. Brazil is back in action this weekend. Copa Libertadores and Sudamericana the following, like literally 3 days later. It's an insane period. I'm knackered before it's even begun, but I'm excited. Brazil is finally back. It's been months on end, and everyone will know like it's my favorite league and it's where all these gems are coming from. And I just love the football, and the league's improving massively year on year at the moment. So yeah, very excited that it's back.
Some of what Nathan said that plays into what we'll discuss around, Murillo, obviously, the evolving Brazilian market, and we've got a few other topics to get into. We'll start with Murillo. Finally made his Brazil debut this week, which we've all been waiting for. Fair to say it didn't go as hoped. They got absolutely battered by Argentina 4-1. Murillo got hooked at half-time, got booked, watched the highlights, and he was involved to varying degrees in 3 goals, I would say. I'll ask Nathan a bit about how it's gone down in Brazil, but what did you make of it, just from the eye test point of view? How did it go from your point of view for him?
We've been itching to see Murillo make his Brazilian debut, but for the way to sort of describe it at the moment, Brazil are not the team we've been brought up to see. They've been very much in transition for the last 12, 18 months. It's been a complete car crash. The plan was to get Carlo Ancelotti in, but he saw it and was like, I do not want to be involved with this at all. And they've had a few decent wins of late against Peru and Chile, but it's sort of papered over the cracks of where they are at the moment. And I was so excited to see Murillo finally get an opportunity, but away at El Monumental, a stadium I've been to, even just for a River game, is very, very daunting. And they turned up in Argentina's backyard, having Rafinha mouthed off about how he was going to score and sort of F and blind them off the pitch as well. So he riled Argentina up, who are by far the best team in South America. So to do that against your rivals was an idiotic decision to make. And Brazil actually went to Argentina with players suspended, obviously Gabriel, which is why Murillo was able to start. Bruno Guimaraes wasn't there as well. And Dorival Jr. is, well, I think he's lost his job in the last week because of this result. So maybe long term that's going to help Murillo out. But to go sort of into that environment, it was a tall order for him. I'm sure the other centre backs, Lucas Beraldo and Leo Ortiz, were very happy that they didn't start because he was sort of fed to the lions a little bit. But Murillo didn't have a good game. But guess what? No one else did either.
The other thing about Brazilian football, which I think we have some appreciation of, but you'll have a much bigger appreciation of, is just the kind of the fan culture, the media culture over there. I remember we were on here, I think your appearance before last, we discussed Vasco da Gama briefly. And like those Brazilian fans in the YouTube comments, in our Twitter mentions, they seem to latch on to everything. So I can only imagine the way this has gone down in the Brazilian media and fan culture online isn't great. How bad has it been for Murillo?
Not good, but not good for many players either. I think because of the situation they're in, they don't want the manager there. Like, even for friendlies in Brazil, if they lose them or they don't perform in them, like, even if they just about scrape a win but don't perform well, they did that in a couple of friendlies before the recent Copa America last summer. Brazil fans were onto the team, onto the players, constantly demanding more. Like, there's so much pressure around England to achieve something, but in Brazil, it's just something else. So yeah, Murillo has received plenty of backlash for his performance. Maybe to be expected. When he made a few mistakes and in and around the goals, I was expecting it, and Twitter was a bit of a bloodbath, but it wasn't just for him. I think the fact that there'd been so much hype around Murillo performing in the Premier League, maybe some Brazilians hadn't seen that. And then they come into a game which is against Argentina, you just don't lose anyway, let alone in that manner. And that whole back line was a complete disaster, but what was in front of them didn't help either. But if we look at the other end of the pitch, Vinicius Jr., we know to be one of the best players in the world, right? So many arguments that he should have won Ballon d'Or, but he hasn't been able to perform for Brazil. If ever, he scored 4, 5, 6 goals in 40 plus appearances. He's already come out and said that playing for Real Madrid is almost easier than playing for Brazil because of the pressure and the demand. So for Murillo to go straight in at centre back as well, right? There's no hiding places against Argentina in their own backyard there. So the backlash wasn't good. But look, if Dorival Jr. gets sacked, he gets a clean slate and he gets to go again. And we all know how that can happen with a new manager.
How well known is he in Brazil? Because I was thinking while you were talking there, like sometimes we'll have a player like Jadon Sancho or something who made his breakthrough in the Bundesliga and then he plays international football, and that might be a lot of fans' first look at him. Is he particularly famous in Brazil or because of the Premier League, or is he still a bit of an unknown quantity for the average fan on the street?
I think if Forest were sat in 8th, 9th, 10th, there'll be that interest, especially from a Corinthians point of view. They're always like quite proud to go and see their players perform and achieve better things. But the whole Forest team are under the spotlight at the moment because of how well we are performing in the Premier League. And I think Brazil don't have many sort of positives at the moment within the camp, and there hasn't been any negative chat around Murillo all season from pundits, Forest fans, etc. So I think they were almost looking at Murillo coming in as like he's going to be our saving grace here. So a clean sheet and maybe a win in Argentina was on the cards. But that was never going to happen because Argentina and Brazil are just completely chalk and cheese at the moment. So yeah, I think he was fed to the lions a little bit. I was positive before the game because it was, look, seeing a Brazilian who plays for Nottingham Forest start against Argentina is something probably we never thought would ever happen. But in the back of my mind, I was just like, let's just hope this isn't a car crash. And after 10, 15 minutes, unfortunately it was. But look, there's still a year before the World Cup. I think a new manager will come in. So we'll just have to wait and see. But at the moment, with Gabriel Marquinhos, they do form quite a nice partnership. Maybe Murillo has to just get used to the squad and his environment because it's a completely different ball game and pressure.
Do you think two more questions on Murillo, probably that you can't really answer either without a little bit of guesswork, but do you think he's in the squad for the next game or will they bin him off?
He'd probably be involved within the squad. It'll be between him and Lucas Beraldo for PSG, and obviously he's had a wonderful season, especially performing quite well in the Champions League as well. So it'll be between the two. So it all depends on if Dorival Jr. is in charge or not. So it's a bit of an impossible question at this moment in time.
What's his pedigree like, Dorival Jr.? This is showing my ignorance of South American football. What's his pedigree like as a manager? Is he lucky to have the job in the first place or not?
It just goes to show that where Brazilian football is with national level at the moment, it is nowhere near what you and I and maybe our listeners are used to with Brazil. Obviously, we only sort of see them every 4 years at a World Cup and you expect them to perform based on their European players. But at the moment, there is only one Brazilian coach who's up and coming, and listeners will know because that's Felipe Luis, who is the ex-Chelsea left-back. He's now Flamengo manager and he's doing an incredible job there. But apart from him, there is no one else out there. They all went all in the Brazilian FA to getting Carlo Ancelotti. He didn't want the job because of the state of Brazilian football at the moment on a national level. Dorival Jr. had won cups with Flamengo and won the Copa de Brazil with Sao Paolo the year before he was appointed. So he was the only one there with sort of any sort of experience in this sort of tournament football. And they lent on him because before it was Fernando Diniz, who was managing Fluminense and Brazil at the same time. Now imagine that in England. Imagine Thomas Tuchel managing England and say Chelsea at the same time. Like it would never work. So Brazil is just on and off the pitch at the moment, a complete mess. And it's been left with Dorival Jr., but he's not at that pedigree, unfortunately, and it's starting to show.
The other thing we were discussing about Murillo yesterday was just around team selection against Brighton. We obviously did our lineups as normal, which you've partaken in. I think who was on? Greg and Temps didn't have Murillo in their team. Actually, no, Temps didn't. I did. And I did and Greg did. And my thinking of playing him was to get this, flush this out of his system. I guess there's arguments that you'll know more around travel times, jet lag, that kind of stuff. But would you play him against Brighton or not?
I think if there's enough time, I can't remember off the top of my head. You'll have to remind me how many days were in between that fixture and the Brighton game. 3-4 days for me.
Yeah, it's late Tuesday, early hours of Tuesday into Wednesday, wasn't it?
Okay, yeah. I think it's fine. Like he getting back into that Forest environment. We all know what the Forest squad's like off the pitch. Okay, I don't think it'll impact him too much. It will definitely have upset him. Of course, you've just been humiliated against your arch rivals away from home, but getting back in that team, get him doing what he does best. And look, Forest, we have a huge opportunity to go far in the FA Cup here, and one step away from Wembley. You can't not play arguably your best player. Maybe I'm a bit more biased there, but he has to come straight back into that team if he's fit. And I feel like he has such a strong mindset anyway. Let's get him back in.
Yeah, that was my thinking. I've got no qualms with playing him at all, certainly. Just before we go to a break and a word for the Trent Nav, we're obviously discussing Argentina kind of as a tangent there. Dominguez not in the squad. Is he pushing, do you think, for a recall at the moment with how he's played in the short term for Forest, or does he need a lot more top performances to get back in?
I was thinking this, especially 2 or 3 months ago when it was the previous World Cup qualifiers. I thought he was a shoe-in really to get into that 25, 26-man squad. But I think they've just shown how good they are. And Scaloni hasn't mentioned his name once, or there's been no journalists who have questioned him about it as well. I've been sort of tuning in just to hear if Dominguez's name has been coming up or not, but it hasn't. But I don't think that's anything against Dominguez. I think it just shows how strong Argentina are at the moment. So look, it's funny when Forest post out about who's going on international week. The only comments are, I hope they don't play or they don't come back injured. So maybe that's music to Forest fans' ears that Dominguez isn't involved with the Argentinian squad as of yet.
Maybe so. Right, we'll branch off into other topics in 1 second, but just a reminder, we are playing Brighton tomorrow. The game is on at the Trent Navigation because it's on TV, kick-off 5:15 p.m. So get down there, watch the game indoors or outdoors, get your dinner down there as well, make an evening of it. And I think it'll be the same for the Man United game. In fact, I'm sure it will be. But we'll confirm that next week. So thanks as ever to the Nav for their support. One of the other topics I want to get you on for, to get your thoughts on. I was a bit confused by Evangelos Marinakis' interest in South American football. Like I said, we were discussing Vasco da Gama not long ago. Then I was reading an article about Sao Paolo, but not buying the club, buying into the youth team, I think. Can you tell us a bit more, put some flesh on the bones about what's actually happening as you understand it?
Sadly, not on a deep level, but it is interesting to see that there is that huge desire to move into South America, not just to sign transfers, but to get your foot in the door. Marinakis wants to extend his empire, and it only makes sense to continue that in South America. Now, look, we all know about Palmeiras' academy, or we've spoken about it before on the podcast, and how they keep churning out wonderful players, but they're based in Sao Paulo. Sao Paulo's under 20s just won the Copinha, which is a state tournament between January and February where everyone starts to get a look at players, and probably going to talk about one or two of those a little bit later on when you ask me about players who I'd like to see move across to Forest. Now, Sao Paulo have one of the most exciting academies in Brazil. Okay, they're still in the same catchment area for Palmeiras. So yes, Palmeiras have that pull, but Sao Paulo, by winning this competition, have shown what they can do. And I read as well, it's like a 30% stake within it. And then obviously the Daily Mail did an article about how Forest may go off and sort of almost start their own academy, or buying into like a Serie B, Serie C side and trying to entice players to come there out of the spotlight. I don't see how that would ever work, because there's a huge gap between Serie A and Serie B in terms of quality. And there's so much access to players now who are performing well straight away. It's all over social media. So you wouldn't really be able to hide or entice players out of these big academies to form your own. So it probably makes more sense to almost have this stake within Sao Paulo. Maybe it's a case of getting your foot in the door and building those relationships where he can potentially then move these players across to Rio Ave or Olympiacos and Forest, etc. So it's almost a bit like Russian dolls as to how I see it. He's just trying to add another one to sort of his collection. And I think it's always the end goal is going to be either Olympiacos or Forest, and getting in the door with an academy as established and well-known and as good as Sao Paulo's can only be a benefit. Maybe, I know we were having this conversation a few months ago about him trying to buy Vasco. Maybe it's a little bit more difficult, and dealing with Brazilian clubs isn't always the easiest. So maybe it's a case of like, this is a second option as to what we can do, and then potentially we can use this as a route into Europe. So really interesting to keep an eye on. Like, apologies, I don't know the full ins and outs at the moment. Obviously, it's very hush hush, but I see it as a huge positive that Marinakis wants to move into Brazil. And with the spotlight firmly now on Brazil's top flight, like, it's not as easy for clubs now to go, who's the next Murillo? If he's played 10, 15 games, other teams will be keeping an eye on him as well, or trying to buy these players even earlier. So it's now a difficult game. Forest have obviously got their foot in the door early, like Brighton, but Chelsea are very active there as well now. And with the amount of money they've got and the pulling power they still operate with, it's going to be a challenge. So you almost need to go a level down, don't you? And sort of almost buy those 17, 18-year-olds, or have them sort of like looking at that route into European football when they're even younger, which is quite mad to say that we are going to be looking at that level. But I suppose it's very organised from Forest, and there's an approach there which could work long term.
Yeah, it was quite. There was a few points in the article that were interesting. They referenced comparison with Brighton, how they're data led and we're more eyes on the ground type thing, with lots of scouts around there, and Ferreira from Benfica bought in. So it was interesting. Tell us a little bit more about the evolving Brazilian market then. You mentioned it there. It feels like the bargains are harder to come by, and have the Brazilian clubs got a bit wise to the fact that they might be able to get bigger prices for their players now then?
It's a yes and no, because teams like Corinthians, who we seem to have a good relationship with for the players we've brought across and who we've been linked with, they have huge financial burden. So if they don't achieve success this season, they will likely have to sell again. So there will be certain players who will be going for X amount more than what they usually are, because this league has grown tremendously over the last 18 months. The rate has been alarming over someone who's been watching this league for the last 10 years. It sort of stagnated for such a long period of time. But now you have players like Neymar, Memphis Depay, Dimitri Payet going over there, Coutinho, all going across like slightly younger, and players are wanting, so more eyes are on the league, players are wanting to develop and stay a little bit longer. But still, when you say more money, what Danilo was 15, 16, 17 million, is not going to go from 16, 17 million all the way up to 50 million. They wouldn't be able to do that, because I think Forest will be able to understand the situation these clubs are in. So I think it will add a bit of extra value to it. But if Forest are, touchwood, going to qualify for a Champions League spot or even a Europa League, there's going to be the budget there to sort of add on that extra 5, 10, 15 million, whatever it is, or extending the contract, because Danilo came across obviously on a 5-year deal or 6-year deal, I believe, as well. So funds and prices will go up, obviously, but I don't think it's going to go up a drastic rate, as it is in Europe anyway. So that's why it's still going to be a happy hunting ground for not only Forest but other clubs.
Yeah, and we've talked pretty exclusively about Brazil. Obviously, there's more leagues in South America. We signed Sosa from one of them. What's the standards of the other leagues and leagues we could exploit, do you think, this summer? Is it the Brazilian market's streets ahead of the rest, or is there opportunities for Forest in other countries?
The Brazilian league is just levels and levels above anything else at the moment. Argentina is sort of going through quite a financial crisis as a country within itself. A lot of the clubs are fan-led. Brazil changed over the last 3 or 4 years to allow sort of third parties to come in and not just Brazilians own the clubs. So they've been welcoming this extra funding, and they needed to do that in order to sort of keep themselves on the map worldwide. Argentina has sort of passed laws where third parties, for example, like Marinakis, could go and buy an Argentinian club if you wanted to. That is now very much legal and there, but there's a lot of hesitancy between clubs and fans that they want to give away their clubs, but they know that they will be left behind a little bit. So it's a bit of a catch-22 with that. Argentinian football, look, we look at the national team, and I think that they have the best team in the world. So it's hard for me to turn around and be not as impressed. And we've seen players like Valentin Barco being picked up from Brighton, Alan Varela, who's moved across to Porto. There are players still being produced in Argentina. But the Daily Mail did touch on it. I don't know if they touched on it in the right way, but Ecuadorian football is on the rise. There's 2 or 3 teams in there who we need to keep an eye on. If we look at the Sudamericana winners which is, for listeners who don't know what that is, that's like the equivalent to the Europa League in South America. In 2022, Independiente del Valle won it, who have produced Moses Caicedo, for example. 2023, Liga de Quito, huge Ecuadorian team, won it. So those are the two teams I'd probably be keeping an eye on. And players are moving across to Europe, sort of, which we wouldn't necessarily know about and we need to keep an eye on. For example, Independiente del Valle, they sold Kendry Páez to Chelsea for 17, 18 million, and he's a wonderful footballer. But in the summer, I've got a list here. They sold Kerry Arroyo to Besiktas for 6 million. He's 19. Yamar Medina, who's 20, to Genk for 5 million. And then there's a couple of players who are going across to the MLS because that's proving to be quite a nice way of players learning their trade and getting more in the spotlight. For example, if we look at Thiago Almada, who played for Argentina the other night, won the Copa Libertadores with Botafogo, now he's playing for Lyon. So the MLS is proving a nice place for South American players to develop as well. And we will actively look at the MLS more than the Ecuadorian league, for example. So it helps them out. But there's 2 or 3 teams in Ecuador that I would be keeping an eye on. And obviously Independiente del Valle, Liga de Quito, and Barcelona. Obviously not the Barcelona Sport C. So those 3 to keep an eye on. I think in the Daily Mail, they said about Deportivo Cuenca, and I have no idea why that come up. I think it's a bit of a stab in the dark, to be honest with you. They've not produced any exports to Europe as far as I'm aware over the last 5-10 years. So I don't know if that was just to sort of fill an article. I'm not really sure. But there's only 3 real teams in Ecuador. But Ecuador sits second in the South America World Cup qualifiers as well, producing some really strong players and tucked right in behind Argentina. So that can't be ignored either. So I think it's an area to exploit. There's 2 or 3 teams there who are almost built to develop players and bring them across to Europe. And I've got a player I'm keeping my eye on, which I'd love Forest to potentially look at anyway. He's been on my wish list for quite a while, but I'm sure we'll get towards that at the end of the podcast. So yeah, Argentinian football, it's a bit stagnated at the moment. It's at a crossroads where it needs more money pumped into it and needs for the investors to be welcoming. And if they don't do that, they're going to fall behind. So yeah, at the moment, fairly slim pickings in Argentina, especially compared to Brazil. So yeah, but Ecuador's the next one in line for sure.
Interesting. I'll drop a link to the article in the mail in the comments, in the description, by Tom Colomossi. People can check it out. I think it's a subscription one, but there's a way around it, but I won't put it in. It won't say it in here, but you can always read these things. But yeah, check that out. I mentioned Ramon Sosa very briefly. He feels like he's a bit on the outs at the moment. I know there was a thing he posted on Instagram about his motivation being the Paraguay national team. What do you make of where he's at? This is a little bit of a fan question and also a journalistic question, I guess. What are you thinking around Sosa at the moment?
No one expected Nottingham Forest to be sat in 3rd place at this point. I think players Jota was brought in at the same time. I think both of them were almost as if they were going to take Forest to the next level. Forest have flirted with relegation over the last couple of seasons. I think we're all quietly confident we wouldn't be doing that this time round, but I think the natural step, and I think I said to you, I'd be happy with 14th plus. So in and around there, these are players who would get game time and take you to the next level, or have this season to sort of establish themselves in a European environment, especially Sosa. But because of the quick progression, because of Hudson-Odoi, Elanga, Gibbs-White all playing incredibly well, it's limited his opportunities, and Forest have leapfrogged 1 or 2 years within a season, which I don't think many people would have expected. So Sosa probably came along thinking he was going to get opportunities, but because of how well the team's playing, it's been hard to give him those. And I think Jota was brought in almost like at one point, was he going to go to Olympiacos on loan or not? So he's the preferred substitute over Sosa, which maybe Forest fans will agree with me or not, but I would prefer Sosa to Jota and what he can bring. But obviously, look, I'm not in the training ground every day, so that's maybe a slightly biased view from what I've seen. So I think he's come into a club where they welcome South American players. There's going to be an opportunity, but Forest have gone from 17th to 3rd in a very short period of time, and that sort of meant that he's missed out. And I did watch the Paraguay game the other day when they won at home to Chile 1-0, and Sosa looked rusty, looked like he hadn't played. He would look frustrated because he was trying to impress, but he's barely played any minutes for Forest. So, yeah, I do feel for him. There's a talent in there, very technical, good player, but you know yourself, you need to play regular minutes in order to showcase that, and he's just not had that opportunity.
Which begs the question, what do we do with him next season then? Because I think he's 25. He might be even pushing 26. I was thinking if you sold him, what would you get for him? I think we paid 10 million. I guess you wouldn't get much more than that, I don't think. So what would you do with him next season, do you think?
I think it would very much depend on what the player wants as well, because so many times when South American players don't work out in Europe, they want to go home. They want to return home and build up their confidence. We've seen it with Vitor Roque, who went to Barcelona and then they never played him, and now he's back in Brazil to boost up his confidence and get playing again. We've seen it time and time again, especially with Brazilians who seem to love going to Russia and Ukraine for whatever reason, and then that doesn't work out and they return home. So it wouldn't surprise me if Sosa went back to Argentina to pick up, because he was one of the best players in the league there. You don't go turn into a bad player overnight. From a Forest point of view, they'll probably want to make money on him or maybe load into Olympiacos. But when that happens at the moment, I don't feel like there's a right path when we loan players to Olympiacos. It seems to be a little bit of a graveyard. So there's no real success stories out of that as of yet, unless I've missed a glaringly obvious one. So I'm not sure. It's a case of maybe you want to recoup your money, and if Forest in the Champions League, we need to be looking at higher profile or higher quality players. But you don't know how long the Champions League dream could potentially last with Forest, because it's balancing the Champions League football with the Premier League. Sometimes you see teams sort of drop off a little bit in the Premier League whilst they try to prioritise that. So maybe loaning out Sosa, seeing where Forest are the season afterwards before they completely give up on him, might be the right way to tackle it.
I think one side point to that is I think the Olympiacos avenue is going to be closed for a year. If we're both in the Champions League, one of the terms is you can't trade between clubs. So
I hadn't thought about that. So yeah,
no, it creates a slightly different complexion on things around Carmo and people like that. What we do with them as well. I'm going to ask Nathan, as mentioned, about players he'd like to sign. Just on the other side of a word for our second sponsors, Home Move Estate Agents. Something slightly different. I will give a little plug for them as ever. But one of Ben's colleagues, Kieran, is singing in a choir, Nottingham Men Aloud. It's a charity concert on the 6th of April at the Albert Hall. It's in aid of Prostate Cancer UK, something that's close to Kieran's family, unfortunately, of late. So if you want to, you can get involved in it yourself if you want to sing, I think, or support them. Probably too late to get to sing. But if you want to go down, you can get a ticket for £10 plus a booking fee. There's a QR code on the screen. So do get involved in that if you want. And if you're looking to buy or sell, as ever, then do check out the Home Move Estate Agents website, and thanks to them as ever for their support. Right, you might have seen Monday's podcast, you might have not, but myself, it was last Monday's podcast, was it? I can't even remember when it was. It was with Pete and Mikey anyway, and we did something around which players we'd like to see Forest sign in the summer. We picked one each. I think mine was Polinia, Mikey's was Chris Rigg, and Pete's was Florentino Luis. So a couple of defence midfielders and a very, very talented young English central midfielder. So I sent Nathan some notes and said, can you pick out a player you would like Forest to sign from the South American market with your fan hat on and your journo hat on? So what name or names are you going to bring to us?
I've got loads, but I'm just going to put 3 forward, because when you were pushing for 1 there. So I'll go with 3, but I'll do different for positions if that helps out as well.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
There's a centre back / sort of right back for Club Brugge called Joel Ordonez, who I've put forward before. Towering, quick, pacey Ecuadorian centre back who's performed really well for his national team. He's had to slot in at right back at times where it's not his trade, but he's performed really well. Really like defenders who can be more diverse. Has European experience with Club Brugge. He's worked really well since coming across to Europe again. He came across from Independiente del Valle, one of the best academies in Ecuador, if not South America. Has worked really well for Club Brugge. And I think he could be a perfect addition, because look, if Murillo or Milenkovic get injured, I think, and you think you need to have 3 or 4 real, I know I've got Morata, but I think we need to have really 4 solid centre-backs if you're going to be in European competition next season, and he's proven to be a good level there. So someone who's already in Europe, but maybe the audience haven't heard of, and I don't think he'd be that expensive. Maybe if I was to hazard a guess, between 10 to 12 million, so fairly cheap in today's market. Another one I like, I know I brought up Breno Bidon before, so I'm not going to talk about him, but I have brought him up on the podcast. I'm a huge fan of him, defensive midfielder from Corinthians, and that relationship's there. But I'm going to throw a different name about, there's a 23-year-old defensive midfielder from Sao Paolo called Pablo Maia, who was heavily linked with a lot of Premier League clubs a year ago, but had a horrific injury and is only just recently returned and been playing in sort of the State Cup / pre-season the last couple of months. He's going to be lining up alongside Oscar and Lucas Moura. What a wonderful combination if you want to tune into a Sao Paulo game. But he's excellent. He worked his way into the Brazilian national team. Brazilian fans like him. And for those who have listened to the whole podcast, it's hard to win over Brazilian fans from the off. So he's a real bulldozer of a defensive midfielder. So really like the look of him. I think he has a perfect opportunity to move across to a top European team. And then the last one's a bit of a wild card, but I think he's going to be a fabulous player. He's only just turned 18. Ryan Francisco, who plays for Sao Paulo, scored 10 goals in 7 Copinha games. Just been promoted to Sao Paulo's first team, so an 18-year-old to keep an eye on. So he's only played 1 or 2 games so far in the early stages of the season, but Sao Paulo sold a 18, 19-year-old this window called William Gomez, who was a striker, to Porto for 9-10 million. So you have to act quick, but my word, this kid is unbelievable. In the semi-finals of the Copinha, his team were 1-0 down. Sao Paulo won 2 penalties in added time, and he did a Panenka for both. So he's got a lot of confidence on him. And I think the last one was like the 99th or 100th minute as well. So the audacity just to do it. Sometimes when you see player who have that much confidence at youth level, it can sometimes really translate well into Brazilian football. So yeah, one to keep an eye on. And obviously there's that nice Sao Paulo link potentially.
Yes, that was what I was going to say. So would you think that if Marinakis were to buy into Sao Paulo's, even a 30% stake in their academy, I still don't understand how that would work, but that would, in theory, give us a leg up on potential young talent like this, is the thinking, you imagine?
Well, you would like to think so, wouldn't you? It makes perfect sense, especially if Forest are going to be in and around European football, hopefully over the next 2, 3, 4 years. You want to be getting the best players and access to it first. So he's clearly looking to get, again, I've said it, but he's foot in that door, build that relationship, and he's clearly targeting big clubs or big academies in Brazil. So whether that was Vasco, whether it's going to be Sao Paulo, he's clearly keen, isn't he? So it's going to be very interesting to follow.
Does one last thing I haven't thought, does Edu, his presence, I don't know if he even officially works for us yet, does he hopefully cut through some of the kind of red tape and interesting conversations that you might have to have with Brazilian clubs to get in then? Is that part of the thinking?
It's only going to help, isn't it? Yeah, I'm a bit like you. I'm not 100% sure like where that's at the moment, but it seems to be something which is going to happen. So yeah, obviously nothing really happened with Arsenal, but Arsenal aren't a team who seem to be risk takers. I don't think top 4 teams really are, because price doesn't matter to them, almost as if, say, Danilo comes across, plays incredibly well, Arsenal can pay double or triple to get him into the team once he's proven himself. I think teams like that are still happy to be the guinea pigs. So yeah, maybe that's why Edu wants to come to a team like Forest, who are openly having that relationship, and he can be a big presence and really involved within that. So yeah, also really exciting.
Just remind us of the names of those players. People want to Google them. What were the names you threw out there?
Joe Ordonez, Pablo Maia, and Ryan Francisco.
Lovely. Good stuff. One of the side transfer note I saw today when I was just flicking through my phone, as people do all day now. Jonathan David, an article came up about him. People are always in the live and the comments on here. Signed Jonathan David. There were 6 Premier League clubs listed as being interested in him, and we weren't one of them in the I paper. It was West Ham, Newcastle, Chelsea, Liverpool, Man United, the usual suspects, basically. So yeah, that was the plan there. Right, I think we shall leave it there. If you've enjoyed this, as ever, do us a favor, hit like, hit subscribe. Do consider membership or Patreon. If you're a member or a patron, you'll get early access to things like this. So do check that out. You can get your merchandise to the podcast from forest-focus.co.uk as well. And you can get your live show tickets. It's on next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. As mentioned, myself with Greg, Mikey, Temps and Pete on the stage. So join us for that if you would. There's a reminder. I'll put the ticket link in the description, but they're only a £5, so it'd be good to see you there for that. Before you give us a plug for Copa, for the Copa Club, anything you want to add today that we might have missed around South American football, or any Forest fandom points you want to say around the Brighton game with your fan hat on? Anything you want to add?
Nothing I want to add. It would just be great to return to Wembley. And I still, it's a pinch of myself moment that we even went to Wembley and won once. Okay, so the fact that Forest can potentially go back, I think we're at that stage in the competition now where we have to take it incredibly seriously. So this is why I would like Murillo to return to the starting 11. And it's going to be really tricky, isn't it? But it's exciting just to be in this situation, to be in multiple competitions or in the running for stuff at this stage of the season, which isn't relegation, is still wonderful to see. So yeah, hopefully we squeeze through.
Hopefully people enjoyed that. I really did. I found that really interesting. We referenced right at the top how busy Nathan's been with South American football. So if you want to learn more about all this, expand on the conversation we've had today, where can people find a bit more of you, Nathan?
Yeah, I still haven't really transitioned across to Blue Sky, so I'm still sticking with Twitter, X, whatever it is at the moment. So yeah, follow me on that, and then yeah, follow the Copa Club. We do bi-weekly podcasts at the moment in and around Brazil. Now it's back. The main competitions in there, Libertadores, etc., talking about these youngsters and players who could potentially moving across to Europe, as well as the bizarre and wonderful stories which happen in South America almost on a daily basis. So there's something for everyone in there.
Who are you doing though? Is it a regular cast then? Is it you and one of the guys? Is it like what we do with a kind of a revolving panel?
It's a revolving panel between 2 or 3 of us, but I've just got a new co-host for the Brazilian sort of bi-week. We're doing one a month where we will go in depth on Brazil's top flight. She's called Jessica Frota, and she's amazing. She's very, very knowledgeable. So yeah, if you don't want to listen to me, there is someone else who there is definitely better than me. So yeah, there's a few of us who sort of like just interlude, be like you guys.
Excellent. Well, part of the thinking is, we rotate because some people, not everyone likes everyone. So hopefully there's a bit of something for everyone. That's the plan anyway. Right. That was great. Really enjoyed that. We shall be back tomorrow with a Brighton post-match show. Monday with Kelvin and Temps, certainly. Tuesday, it's a really busy week. Tuesday, Man United post-match show. Wednesday review show, Thursday Villa preview, Friday Villa opposition preview, and then another game. It's going to be like this running in the Champions League, though, isn't it? So I should get used to it.
Yeah, that's it. You need more co-hosts for the jobs.
Exactly. Right, that was great. Thanks to Nathan. Have a good day, everyone. And if we don't see you tomorrow, we shall see you soon.